We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. I'm sure it's fucking shit. I was there, when I was there last weekend in Melbourne, it was like freezing. I know they say this, but it's really true. It was freezing. And then it was like, oh, you've got a wedding today where everyone's got to wear suits and sit outside in the sun. And it was like 2 degrees. Even I was like, this is a bit much.
Would you say it's like we have 4 seasons in one day?
It's like 4 seasons in one day. Melbourne.
Do you want to kick it off if we're seeing some music?
Yeah, sure.
Only if it's not too much trouble for you. I don't want to.
No, that's fine. I'll perform the free labour of kicking off the podcast for you, Tom, as a woman.
the emotional labour.
I've got washing in the dryer. Is there anything else you want me to do? Care for a child or something?
You could smile a little bit more.
I smile a little bit more. Hey, patrons. It's Emerald and Tom from Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia. But you already know that because you, dear listener, are the reason this podcast exists. That's right. Thank you for being a Patreon subscriber. We love you. You help keep the show going. And you pay Michael the Griffin's wages, who is the producer of this podcast and who we love very much. We are back. We are back for more Inside the Greens this week. We are reading Chapter 7, and I'm reliably informed that the title of this chapter is Turning the Corner, which I'm very much looking forward to. We're doing the first half of that. We're getting into we're going basically up to, what is it, pretty much right up to the 2001 election on this week's episode.
Yes, we're going to split this chapter into 2 parts again, I think, because I think we're just moving too fast through this book. So we're just going to slow down.
Whoa. Yeah, hold up.
And in this chapter, we are looking at Rhiannon coming onto the scene, mixing some shit up. There's some juicy goss you're going to hear, a little bit of tension, some rising tensions between New South Wales Greens and the Federal Party, and some good news that are happening around the world globally for the Greens and the Australian Greens' role in bringing the Greens, the anti-globalisation movement together. It's very nice.
Very exciting. Do you remember, should we do a quick recap? Last chapter 6, was picking fights. We were talking about Howard's first term as Prime Minister. We talked about the fight against the Jabiluka uranium mine. Scott Ludlam entering the scene and being a little rugrat
and a
playwright. Jabiluka progress.
Yeah.
Yes, and his mum and his Atomic Oz cartoon, etc. We talked about the 1998 election. Things were just not looking too good for the Greens. We had some soul searching, some election reviews, some frank reflections. We were competing against the Democrats, who were also being shit on the GST, which introduced, and we finished with this little paragraph. Quote, after 5 years as a confederation in which it had contested 3 elections, at the end of 1998, the Australian Greens were little stronger than they had been at the beginning. They had 1 senator, had been almost wiped out in their home state of Tasmania, were estranged from the environmental movement, and had burned their bridges with Labor, and their primary vote was falling. The next election, when Bob Brown's Senate term was up, would be do or die for the party.
God, we had bridges with Labor? I don't remember. That was just like preference deals and stuff, I guess. But yeah,
I guess so. I don't know. And we stopped that dam together or something. You know.
Well, the people stopped the dam, and then Bob Hawke came along and said, I agree.
Beers for everyone.
Anyone who doesn't stop this dam is a bum.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do Hawke different to Howard. Howard's a lot easier, I think, but Hawke is kind of...
Can you do Howard?
Yeah. Ugh, g'day. I'm John Howard. We've discussed this. I'm very good at John Howard.
Oh, we'll decide who comes to this country.
We'll decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
Closing my eyes. Yeah. It's like he's here. Pretty good.
He's in the room.
Really good. That was actually just a clip that Mike inserted.
So, yes, we're heading towards the 2001 federal election. But before that, we will meet Rhiannon and have a look at the New South Wales Greens. A little lady
by the name of Lee.
A sweet little broad. A real mouthy broad. Who is also a communist and very cool. So it starts off by laying out the fact that the growth in grassroots movements in New South Wales and Victoria was coming through local council. They were getting a bunch of gains,
right.
laying the foundations for future wins, which was sort of in contrast to the top-down stuff that was happening in WA and Tasmania, where people were just winning at the state and federal level and be like, hey, we're
and be like, oh, we should have a party to go with this, yeah.
They went the other way. The Australian Greens local government network was formed in 2001. By the following year, there were 37 Green councillors around the country, mostly in New South Wales, giving voters a taste of the party and forming a political talent pool that would include many future MPs.
Mm-hmm.
Important to keep in mind, I mean, we're recording this before we go to New South Wales, but I was looking at it. So there's 74 local councillors in New South Wales alone now of the Greens. So it's good to keep that in mind when we talk about the growth of the Greens over the past 20 years or whatever, like to just appreciate the fact that
made some progress.
Yeah. That's 37 across the entire country in 2002. And now there's 74 Greens councillors just in New South Wales. That's something.
Yes. Been a bit of a struggle in Queensland, of course, where we just made it to 2 this year after only getting our first one in 2016. It's hard. Single-member electorates.
It's about quality, There must be other Greens councillors across Queensland, though. No?
We don't have any Greens councillors outside of Brisbane.
Oh, fucking hell. Okay, that's tough. I mean, Byron Bay is basically Brisbane.
That is Queensland. That's true.
That's Queensland.
Yeah.
So you've got the New South Wales Greens member of the Legislative Council, Ian Cohen, who I think we've met once or twice in the book thus far. Mm-hmm. He's in there fighting the good fight. He's working in an informal accord with New South Wales Labor Premier Bob Carr on environmental issues, like establishing 24 new national parks, cutting logging quotas, and saving old-growth forests.
How'd that work out for him?
Well, before it all goes to shit, he thought it was great. There's a quote in the book: "You can work the system at all levels, legal, direct action, and political, but things happen when you've got someone at the head of the political system who is really genuinely on side."
Change from within.
Yes. I mean, you would have to say that Bob Carr did do some good environmental stuff as part of his government, but it all seems to go to shit. He ends up amending the EPA to bypass community consultation and protecting way less area from logging than promised. I think even less than he promised to. It was much closer to what the CFMEU wanted, right?
Yeah.
And Cohen said eventually when he was betrayed and Bob Carr sold the environmental movement down the river, "To hell with you, Bob Carr. Your government has sold us out and you're not going to get away with it." So I'm assuming based on your question before that you think, it's a tale as old as time. Is this a dead-end strategy, the idea of working in collaboration with people in power at the top who say they're going to do good things for the environment?
Yeah, I mean, surely it relies on the idea that those people in power also want to do good things or will do good things, not even want to, but will, as part of the institutions in which they belong, be able to do good things. And it seems again and again that that's not the case, sadly. And that the idea that the best way to achieve change is by just working with those in power, that idea is it sustains existing power structures, right?
Yes. I mean, look, Bob Carr did good things for the environment. He promised to do good things for the environment because of political pressure. He did it to try and win votes because there was a political threat against him and the Labor Party coming from environmental movement, coming from the Greens. And so, I don't know, I guess you can form a productive working relationship with people, but never forget that power is power, and the things that push people to do good things, which I think, state governments can do good things for the environment, but they will only do them as a result of, the pressure from a movement.
Yes, as opposed to this idea, this really kind of sweet, but I think incredibly naive idea that a lot of people have, which is that they just need to have someone in their circle that's giving them the right information and letting them know the facts of the situation, and then they'll act on that. Not the case.
Not the case. And just think about it. That's why Labor hates the Greens so much in all these negotiation fights that we see rolling out. Because if they could ignore them, they just would. But they can't because of the small, granted, but the real political power that Greens, the movement, have won by electing those MPs and holding the balance of power in Senate means that, you can't just say, well, I don't give a fuck what you think, Greens. No, they have to do something to use them to execute their agenda. And so that's the only real power that we have, and the only real thing that Labor or power structures listen to.
Some might say pressure works.
Now, is that like a lame phrase, or is that
pressure works?
That's what the Greens just say when we get a win.
I associate it primarily probably with Max Chandler Mather says it a lot. Like when we make wins, when we make gains as a result of political pressure, I think it's helpful to reiterate that is what has achieved that result. It was pressure. Pressure does work, I think. Yeah.
And it's the only tool at our disposal, really, I think.
Yeah, at least the most effective one, I'd say.
Some other tidbits about Ian Cohen's time in Parliament. On the crossbench, Cohen worked increasingly closely with Democrats defector Richard Jones, a former Australia Party environmentalist. Cohen and Jones both supported government moves to decriminalise recreational marijuana use and were pilloried as potheads in Parliament and the tabloid media. The jokes fell flat when they responded by calling for drunken MPs to be breathalyzed. Boom!
Classic. Zing. Got you now. Ha ha ha. And you know who made, what's that sticker that you can get in Nimbin? God made marijuana, man made alcohol. In whom do you trust?
Whoa.
Think about it. Think about it.
And that's how cannabis got legalized in New South Wales. So it worked.
Right. Maybe pressure doesn't work.
Maybe cool comebacks and witty cutting remarks don't do anything at all.
Don't say that, Tom. Puts our podcast in danger.
Fuck. Cohen went hard against the M2 freeway through the Sydney's northwest, which included an outrageous clause preventing the government from building competing public transport links during its 30-year life. Cohen revealed that the roads... I want to include this because, again, this came up when I was researching the book, and it just awakes a passionate hatred within me like nothing else. These contracts that Transurban have set up with state governments since the 90s. Is this a
toll road?
Yes. M2 would be a toll road, yes.
Yeah.
You set up a toll road and literally baked into the contract, the government cannot do their fucking job by providing public transport options in competition with the toll road so that we Transurban can make billions of dollars, keep donating money to the Labor Party and get away with murder. It is an absolute disgrace.
Fucked. It should be abolished. Yeah, I mean, that's even worse than, but like it's a similar situation in Queensland where we have the one privatised rail line to the airport, and baked into that contract is, again, I think like a 20 or 30 year exclusion clause that there can't be any other forms of public transport that go to the airport. And surprise, surprise, the airport train costs like $25.
We love competition. So and it's what I guess, your true free market right-wing libertarian freaks would say, oh, that's crony capitalism. Okay, so that's ridiculous. So these private companies shouldn't have these non-compete clauses with state governments. Right. That's an outrage.
Sure.
And of course, you and I say, well, that's just where we're at. I'm sorry. Show me the free market paradise, the libertarian paradise where none of this happens. And they might say Argentina. I go, oh, we're 50% of the population
live below. It's the same logic. It's the logic that's like, well, but if they didn't do it, then this road wouldn't get built, this rail line wouldn't get built, and better that they invest in it than we have to, God forbid, tax people and then spend government money on making it happen for the benefit of everyone.
Jesus. So Lee Rhiannon's kicking around and she ends up as being a candidate in the 1999 New South Wales state election. We met Lee Brown in the very first opening chapter of Inside the Greens when she was little Lee Brown. She was there at a protest.
No relation to Bob.
LBJ. No relation to Bob.
Confusingly.
She'd been a Socialist Party member till her membership lapsed. Oh, excuse me.
Did you stop?
Yeah, kind of.
Me too.
Oh, my God.
That was so cute.
Twins.
Thanks.
And this is why it's worth paying for these episodes. She joined the Greens in 1990. Greens had pre-selected their lead candidate, Lee Rhiannon. Rhiannon had changed her name after a 1989 separation from electrician and journalist Paddy O'Gorman. For the record, Rhiannon's new surname, which was suggested by a friend, had nothing to do with the Fleetwood Mac song. There you go. The more you know.
Mm-hmm.
She had a botany degree and she did her thesis on Banksias. So she had a little bit of green there. She's been a journalist for unions, on the board of Rainforest Information Centre, set up AidWatch, a monitor of Australian Aid, Oz International Aid rather, convener of the Coalition for Gun Control, and had been arrested in 1999 protests to save urban bushland from development at Manly Dam.
I thought this was kind of helpful and interesting to include, right? Because it maybe some people would think, oh, Rhiannon just came from, like, quote unquote, just came from communist roots and her interests were purely, socialism from an economic standpoint. But it shows, like, she clearly had some strong environmental cred when she came to the Greens. I guess almost implying that, yes, environmental justice and socialism are somewhat inextricable.
I think so. And I think, I don't know, I haven't met a socialist who doesn't give a shit at all about the environment or doesn't have some deep fondness. And indeed, most people have a very strong connection to nature in some way, I think, obviously, as we are part of nature.
Probably especially in Australia. I don't know,
yes.
Is that Australian exceptionalism? But I do think so.
No, I do remember I think it was one of those Australia Talk survey that was like a thing that 90% of the population agree on is like, Australia is beautiful, the outdoors is great, the bush rules. But also from a socialist perspective, it's like, there is something about it too, right? Like the idea of a big public green park is fundamentally sort of anti-capitalist, isn't it?
Yes,
the idea that we'd reserve public
socialist.
space that we will all own and appreciate and would make people happy.
Nature is one of the few remaining things that it's like broadly acceptable even under a capitalist society or economy. It's broadly accepted that nature should be publicly owned and accessible, that it shouldn't be the purview of private capital, right? Even though, I mean, in many cases and increasingly it is. But I think, yes, it on principle, people will agree that that's a shared resource, a vanishingly true thing,
Remember during the pandemic, there's that story in Sydney about a guy trying to like set up a private part of the beach, of some beach in Sydney. He was going to like...
and well, they exist.
Private beaches totally exist, but I think in Australia they're pretty anathema. Generally speaking, people are furious. They're like, no, the beach belongs to everyone, motherfucker.
Oh, yeah. I know this is one of those things when you travel overseas and you're like, wait, what do you mean I can't go to that beach? That's the beach. It's the fucking beach. Let me go there. Get the fuck out of my way. Yeah. Get off me. No, they propose these like private beach bars on the Gold Coast at least as well, I know. I don't know if it's ended up happening. I think there's been significant community kind of outrage in response.
Beach belongs to all. Now, Ian Cohen reflects on the choice to select Rhiannon as the candidate in the 1999 New South Wales state election. Ian Cohen had met Rhiannon at university in the 1970s and had no qualms about backing her for pre-selection. I voted for Lee, and that was potentially a mistake, in hindsight, says Cohen now. Although the fact is, if she hadn't gotten up then, she was determined she would have gotten up sometime. At the time, Cohen had faith in their past friendship, respected her activism, and didn't really have any real proper understanding of her quite hardline communist views. It was when he took Rhiannon on a tour to introduce her to senior conservationists and progressive business people from the New South Wales North Coast, greenie movers and shakers, that the alarm bells went off. I got quite a bit of complaint about her afterwards from people who met her, who were pretty astute political operators, saying, "What the hell are you supporting her for?" Rhiannon dismisses Cohen's comments as another of his unsubstantiated slurs against me.
That response from Rhiannon was when I was like, ooh, so there's definitely beef. Ooh.
There is indeed beef. We've talked before about Rhiannon's, thoughts on the book Inside the Greens generally. Appreciates the project, but had picked up a bunch of qualms with it, which again, I think we mentioned when we first started talking about the book Inside the Greens, that people can have a look at if they're interested in looking it up. But I didn't know anything. Do you know anything about this Ian Cohen versus Rhiannon?
No, I don't. It does strike me. Isn't it funny that it's like Ian Cohen almost here sounds like he sounds like he needed those Advance Australia ads to warn him that the Greens weren't just about the environment. It's that same fucking. It's the watermelon, like, scary.
Yeah. I mean, Rhiannon is like the focus of that too, right?
Yeah.
The 1999 election in New South Wales was the notorious tablecloth election, with an upper house ballot paper carrying the names of hundreds of candidates for often misleadingly badged micro-parties.
Wait, why was it? How does tablecloth?
As in the paper, there were so many micro-parties that the ballot paper was so massive. Like it was basically a tablecloth.
Gotcha.
This is the first time old Glenn Drury was involved, the preference whisperer. And he did his thing with all the back deals and trading preferences to get Malcolm Jones from the Outdoor Recreation Party in with just 0.2% of the vote.
Hey, I like recreating outdoors. This guy, that sounds pretty good. Is this guy in favor of beaches? Because I love beaches.
I guarantee, I don't know anything about this party. I assume they're about guns, and I can only assume.
Oh, okay.
Did you ever hear of the free beer and excise party? They did a few rounds.
Free beer and excise? What does that mean?
As in getting rid of taxes on beers, I believe.
Oh, okay. No, excise. Oh, I have not heard of that.
I just remember my lower excise fuel and beer party was a minor Australian political party registered in 2001. It was deregistered by the Australian Electoral Commission on the 19th of December 2005. The party fielded several candidates in the 2001-2004 federal elections. Its main policies included repealing the goods and services tax and lowering the excise on fuel and beer prices.
Specifically.
Many of its policies were centre left. Oh, there you go.
Huh. Yeah, okay.
I must say, taking the GST off beer would be good because Howard fucking promised when he introduced that there would be no GST on beer, and he's a
no GST on beer. I think, yeah, okay. As someone with no stakes in the game, I feel like of all the things, beer would be low on my list to remove GST from. But hey, I don't want the beer-loving masses to come for me, so never mind.
Oh, did you recently celebrate an anniversary of I
did, Tom. Thanks for asking.
Straight edge?
My edgeversary. Yeah, 16 years.
Whoa.
Pretty cool.
Just have one beer. Come on.
Why not even on your birthday?
How do you celebrate?
Yeah.
Have some celery or something? I don't know.
Yes, I have celery, Tom.
So Lee Rhiannon takes on a new strategy. She instead of taking preferences, she focuses on taking preferences with other candidates for preferences, i.e. to win, not preferences for policy. Like Brown. The Greens would favour Labor in the lower house in exchange for Labor preferences in the upper house. What do we think about this?
I think it kind of sounds like a small thing, right? It's just how you do your preferences on your how to vote card. But I think it is indicative of a fairly significant overall strategic difference, like a fairly fundamental difference that it is. Is it about policy or is it about power? Like, is it about moving towards, winning seats and the balance of power and ultimately even government? Or is it, as we were kind of talking about with Ian Cohen and his approach to working with the government, is it about pressuring those in power? And that's always been, that remains the fundamental question of the purpose of the Greens for a lot of people.
And this can happen in the reverse, right? We talked about the LNP in the 2020 Queensland state election preferencing the Greens above Labor. Now, obviously, if you're going by a policy values-based approach, the LNP wouldn't necessarily rank Greens over Labor when it comes to policy, but they did that specifically to undermine the Labor campaign and allow the Greens MP to win. So that would be their approach. So, but we don't do that now anywhere, do we? We're always like we always put one nation last or whatever, or the craziest racists last. And
yeah, well, I think we've moved beyond preferences being our primary leverage for either like for policy in particular, and also not our primary strategy for winning, I guess.
Yeah, right. We just win. That's our new strategy.
We'll just win the seat. It's so true.
The strategy caused some tension between Rhiannon and Bob Brown, the start of much tension, but it did work. Lee was elected with 2.9% of the vote. That included a small swing against her, but she did get in. She got big votes in inner city seats.
Preferences?
On preferences, yes. Yes, through those preferences. Big votes in inner city seats, 29% in Port Jackson and Marrickville, where she finished second. Wow. So the New South Wales Greens now had two MLCs, two members of the upper house, which was a bit of a boon for the Greens generally ahead of the 2001 federal election.
And so to be clear, this is in the New South Wales state election.
Yes,
Not
state
federal.
election.
Yeah.
Yes, Lee was in the state parliament for a while before she went federal in, I think, sort of in 2010 or something like that. No, maybe a bit later.
Mm.
Lee's first speech included a proud acknowledgement of communist parents and her background. I particularly wish to thank my parents, Bill and Frida Brown. My parents were members of the Communist Party of Australia. I was raised surrounded by people whose driving conviction was how to work to make this world a fairer, healthier, more peaceful place for all. Being raised in a household steeped in political campaigns, Lee's one with many proud moments. One of those was the night my father and Jack Mundy became the first people arrested in Australia for protesting against the Vietnam War. Fucking hell. I find these days when I explain my background, some people are surprised by my acknowledgement. I'm certainly proud of being part of a tradition of optimistic social activism.
Queen.
Just lovely to see someone, proudly wear their leftist credentials on their sleeve and say, no, this is good. This is what I believe in. I remember when Doug Cameron retired, the Labor senator from the Senate, gave a speech in which he said, I am a socialist, and the entire chamber broke out in laughter.
When he retired?
Yeah. Annoying. She listed Labor's corporate donors and their close relationship with those big companies like Transurban. And she said this on the fight for Walsh Bay. If the bill passes for the House, the battle to save Walsh Bay will not be over. Just behind Millers Point lies the Rocks, the birthplace of the Green Bands. It was from this movement that my party, the Greens, derived its name. This parliament makes the laws, but it is the people who make history. The Greens will fight all the way with the people of Walsh Bay to ensure we have a city for people and a history of which we can be proud. I just thought that line was great. You know, Parliament makes the laws, but it's the people who make history.
Did they save Walsh Bay?
Good question. Walsh Bay is now where the Sydney Theatre Company is, off the top of my head.
Okay. So good for you personally, presumably.
I love it. It's a wonderful place to go and experience some culture. Certainly around Glebe and all that, there's still that big fight over the housing commission houses in Glebe. I mean, obviously all this land is like multi-million-dollar vibe, but had a huge amount of public housing. Have I got that right? Kind of. But yeah, Walsh Bay is now, you would say, presumably, I assume the Sydney Theatre Company is publicly owned, or at least managed by the council in some way. Yeah,
surely.
Anyway, and the Rocks has become an absolute tourist trap.
Yes, I think even I've been there with family.
Lee Rhiannon also brought on board a guy called John Kay as one of her staffers, who was a committed socialist, a proud member of the National Tertiary Education Union, was pretty fierce in the fight for free education for everyone. And John Kay would go on to be a Greens MP as well. Then the chapter moves into the global picture for the Greens at this point of time. Die Grünen. The German Greens, they're back. They've had a rough couple of years. The Germans. They did very well indeed at the Bundestag, and they formed a red-green government with the Social Democratic Party. Joschka Fischer? How would you pronounce Joschka?
No idea. I don't know. You keep going though.
Joschka? That's it. That's more Scandinavian. Anyway, Fischer. I don't even know their gender, to be honest. Was a foreign minister and was made foreign minister as part of that red-green government, which got a little bit tricky when Germany joined the NATO-led airstrikes in Kosovo. I know so little about Kosovo. I know really nothing about that conflict.
No,
it's also quite embarrassing. It's often presented as like the good, libertarian intervention that, stopped or provided safety to a lot of people. I know a lot of Kosovo refugees came to Australia at that time. A genocide was later determined to be taking place. It's the place where Tony Blair is like, it's the liberal intervention that Tony Blair backed that, of course, he used as a justification for the Iraq War. It's like we did in Kosovo, we can do in Iraq, and sort of thing.
Okay.
I fully admit that I got massive gaps.
I maybe need to read a book.
Knowledge there. But it was described as a humanitarian war, and of course it caused a massive split within the Grünen and the German Greens, because we're like, hey, we're into peace and non-violence, and now we've formed this government and our foreign minister is already backing airstrikes.
Yeah.
The MMP system, the mixed multiple...
Is it mixed member proportional?
Mixed member proportional system. Thank you so much. Which is good for the Greens in Germany, was also spreading around the world. Aotearoa in New Zealand had their referendum, changed their constitution to introduce that system in 1996 and elected 3 Greens MPs right off the bat after that first election once that system was introduced. And then in 1999, elected 7 MPs with 5% of the vote, which got them balance of power straight away. I don't think I realised that. That's pretty good for the Aotearoa Greens. Have you been following all this Waitangi Treaty stuff that's been happening?
I have been watching TikToks.
That's pretty much it.
Well, I remember this was already on the agenda. Like it was in the news as a proposal when I was in Aotearoa because I guess that was right after or around the time of the election. And I think that, the Conservatives brought a proposal to wind back a lot of the gains made under the treaty.
They trashed the Maori health system, I think, which was like a disgrace. Like they want to get rid of that. But yes, they're basically, I mean, we could do a whole episode about it.
Yeah.
The different versions of the Waitangi one that was the treaty, one that was written in English, one that was written in Maori language. And the one that was written in Maori language that was signed by way more chiefs is recognised as like the proper actual treaty. But this new reform is to be like, let's not so much pay attention to that and let's just focus on doing whatever the hell we want.
Yeah, right.
Maori rights be damned.
Yeah. No, because I was, I guess, a little bit, as so many people were, kind of enamored with, like, so impressed by that Maori MP, obviously, starting the haka on the floor of Parliament, and was watching a lot of those videos. And now I'm getting a lot of New Zealand politics videos and learning about the drama with the Greens MP who was like expelled from their party room because allegedly or maybe provably was like exploiting workers. And then there was a court decision that there was a decision that she's now no longer allowed to be an MP, which I thought was very interesting. Maybe we should do a New Zealand politics catch up, because it effectively was like equivalent to, if someone in the Senate, I guess, leaves their party and can then sit as an independent, which we've discussed many times, like with Lydia Thorpe and Fatima Payman. But I think that, she's been like expelled from Parliament.
Jesus. Well, our girl, Chloe Swarbrick, did another fantastic speech about the Waitangi Treaty. So, yes, I'd be totally up for that. Let's check in with those across the Dutch. But, I didn't realise they had balance of power in 1999. Greens co-leader at the time, Rod Donald, wrote that Labor and the Social Democratic Alliance Party were not interested in striking a formal agreement with Labor, I assume. So there was instead a de facto understanding that Greens may exchange information with those ministers who care to share, and that in normal circumstances, the Greens will support the government. This gives the Greens all care, no responsibility, which may be preferable to an agreement. We are free to examine each issue on its merits and to vote with any other party as we see fit. We've been able to force changes to government legislation and appear to have had more influence on legislation than has the Alliance, which I thought was kind of an interesting approach. I guess an alternative, you might think, to as opposed to, say, what the arrangement that the Greens have in the ACT. Where you're like, well, with confidence in supply, but issue by issue, we'll still fight and wield our balance of power and vote the way we want. Which maybe would allow you to go to an election a little less tied up with the record of the current government, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think this would be a question that's put to the membership if and when we find ourselves in balance of power federally. Like, I recall before the last federal election, there was maybe a survey that went out or would have gone out if we were in balance of power. Like, I think that asked, no, it did. It went out and it was like, do you think that if we're in balance of power, we should have a formal agreement? Should we just take each issue as it comes, etc.?
Interesting. The New Zealand Greens were able to get up a royal commission into genetic modification. I don't know. I don't know the details there, but it could be a bit bullshit. Pass their first bill on energy efficiency and get a $15 million green package to fund legal aid for environment groups, the certification of organic foods, and other measures.
Aw, cute.
Oh no, what's in my food?
No, I don't know if this is really good food, bro. Are these chips organic? Is this fish genetically modified?
Fudge. It's fudge.
Fudge?
Yeah, we should definitely do a full episode on it. Oh, boy.
Okay.
All right. Then we have the Global Greens Conference. The chapter lays out exactly what was involved. And I did not realise, I'm always learning, reading Inside the Greens, did not realise that the Australian Greens were responsible for starting the Global Greens. Now, to be fair, I know very little about what the Global Greens is or how it works, but I've definitely heard of it before, and I didn't realise that it was totally us that fucking kicked it all off.
Pretty good.
What should we tell listeners about Global Greens? Do you know much about it?
I don't know a whole lot about it. Like, I know there are Global Greens conferences similar to you would have a national conference where all the member bodies come together and talk about things together, and there's kind of a relationship of mutual support and maybe discussion of how to approach the big policy questions of our time. But I don't know otherwise what formally it means to be a member of the Global Greens, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's sort of these big get-togethers, and the various Greens parties in various countries nominate their reps and they go along. And the same way we have a national conference, obviously they don't pass resolutions or anything because there's no global body, but or
so
policy.
There's no constitution for the Global Greens, or
I think. Well, no, you're right. I think there is, yes,
right.
But it's not like affecting policies of the various. But yeah, I guess encouraging global cooperation. And you might say it's the positive face of globalization, as Bob Brown put it. Strange as it seems in hindsight, given what was come that year, the theme of the 2001 Canberra conference was optimism. Bob Brown described the Global Greens as the positive face of globalization. The backdrop was growing anti-globalization sentiment, which reached a crescendo with the 1999 Battle of Seattle protests against the World Trade Organization. A harbinger of the Occupy movement, the Seattle protests went global and had a new energy, a protest on the net, police brutality live, with unionists and environmentalists on the same side.
This thing about, globalization, because I remember when I was growing up and the way that I learned about the term globalization was, some people think this is bad, but actually it's good. Like, that was the vibe that I got, was that if you were progressive, you thought globalization isn't bad. But I think that was perhaps a, smaller, like socially progressive, maybe economically conservative or economically liberal position. Whereas I imagine a lot of leftists would not be running around saying that globalization is a great thing.
No, surely. I mean, yes, internationalism, sure, thumbs up to that. And fair trade with other countries, okay, sure, in a way. Global cooperation on things like the environment, definitely. But no, globalization, the protest against this is, corporate dominance, global capital dominating all these decisions.
Yeah.
The offshoring of huge manufacturers, the shipping of jobs to other countries to exploit labor even further, which was what was the story of the 90s, right?
And like US hegemony and third world countries being forced into significant debt. And
bad stuff.
Bad things.
We're against bad things here at Serious Danger.
That's right. We denounce them, condemn them even.
At the time, Christine Milne wrote that the Seattle protests were the birth scream of a newly emerging global consciousness. In Australia, the Greens joined the S11 blockade against the World Economic Forum meeting at the Crown Casino, Melbourne in 2000. Half a dozen Greens MPs were there and issued a joint statement slamming the WEF as an ally of the rich, alongside the WTO, the IMF and the World Bank.
Someone tell this to the Facebook conspiracy theorists that they would blow their minds to hear this, because isn't it the Greens, the Green Labour Alliance, that's supporting the WEF takeover and the New World Order?
Right. The globalists.
They'd be very confused. Yeah, we are the globalists.
Yeah, right. Yeah, what is that? I mean, obviously it's crazy conspiracy theories, but what is it? I mean, right, it is that difference, right? Like, yes, we think that nation states should cooperate through bodies like the UN, as flawed as the UN can be. We should reach things like the Kyoto Protocol or the Paris Agreement. Nation states should come together to try and coordinate to arrest the climate catastrophe, to tax the rich globally, to lift people out of poverty. We support all these things. What we do not support is rich countries and massive corporations getting together to fuck over everybody else. Because there are globalist conspiracies between very powerful people across the world to try and do that.
Yeah, I think it's just yes, I don't think we want to or need to reiterate the classic analysis of how conspiracy theories like this grow, but it's a misapprehension or it's a misunderstanding based on kind of rudimentary like analysis of power and control globally, right?
Despite or because of intense security, the blockade, this is at the front of the Crown Casino, was marred by violence, with mounted police and the riot squad attacking protesters around the building. Bob Brown stood up for the blockaders, depicted as thugs by the mainstream media. Fuck yeah, Bob. West Australian Premier Richard Court was trapped in his car as he tried to force his way through, with protesters jumping on the roof, spray painting the vehicle and letting its tyres down.
Oh, can you imagine? 50 years in jail today.
Probably. Oh, now, right, yeah. Yes, firing squad immediately. Brown blamed Court, calling him spoiler/bully of the day for trying to force his way through a peaceful blockade rather than using another entrance like the rest of the dignitaries.
Seems reasonable. Yeah.
Seems pretty fair. Ben Oquist, who was there alongside Brown, Ben Oquist, who is now the executive director of the Australia Institute,
I think so, yeah.
Married to Sarah Hanson-Young, wrote that it was probably the most significant protest since the Franklin and described the protesters as true internationalists, keenly aware of problems outside Australia, eager to promote global solutions to the planet's and humanitarian crises. There you go.
There you go.
And I think, I don't know a huge amount about those particular protests, but yeah, Steve Bracks was the premier here in Victoria, Labor premier, and I think did a pretty shitty job of pretty heavy-handed. Similar to the scenes that we saw outside the weapons conference earlier this year of sending in as many cops as possible and lots of reports of excessive police force and brutality.
Cool.
So 2001, the Global Greens Conference happens in Canberra. There are 800 delegates from 72 countries, which is pretty fucking massive, for God's sake. And Ralph Nader was not there. A historic scene setter came with November's US presidential election, in which George W. Bush beat Al Gore by the slimmest of margins. Gore was not helped by the Green-endorsed campaign of Ralph Nader, who was making his second tilt at the presidency. Nader's vote in the key state of Florida was much greater than the difference between the two frontrunners, arguably costing Gore the presidency. As soon as he was inaugurated, President Bush scotched any notion that the US would sign up to the Kyoto Protocol. Nader, who had been billed to speak at the Global Greens Conference, pulled out late in the piece. A Swiss delegate speculated that perhaps he had not come to Canberra because he was afraid of the critical questions he would receive.
Scared.
Have you heard of this guy, Ralph Nader, before?
No. The name sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't know.
Basically responsible for seatbelts being a thing in the US. It has this huge long career of being a consumer affairs advocate, which sounds a little bit boring, but is actually against the corporate power of corporate America is really important. And so introducing regulations like that is pretty good. Now,
my mum's enemy, she hates seatbelts. That's the whole thing.
Okay, all right. Well, and she votes based on a candidate's position on where they are with seatbelts.
No, yeah. Thankfully, the Greens, I don't think, have a formal position on seatbelts.
Well, yeah, peace and non-violence, but also safety. What Paddy Manning sort of ignores here is the fact that the results in Florida were very contentious, and there is a
What do you mean?
Well, there's a pretty serious theory that Bush basically stole this election. And the Supreme Court had to intervene. A conservative dominated Supreme Court intervened to stop the count of the votes in Florida. It was all very dodgy. There were a bunch of
so the election was stolen.
Yeah. And Al Gore kind of conceded a bit prematurely, I think, is the general consensus, is that he should have waited and sort of pressed his case there. Regardless, the idea that you can blame other candidates for stealing an election, for taking votes off other people, it's nah, man, your job is to win the votes. And in a democracy, people are allowed to vote for who they want.
That's very true. Very true. Why were they voting for them and not you? Not
There's your question. How different were you from Ralph Nader? In the recent example, what's your position on genocide, that you open up enough space to your left when someone says, hey, I think genocide is bad, to make them a viable candidate? Maybe have a look in the mirror.
Yeah, and whose fault is that?
Still, Nader had his supporters at the conference. One pointed out that it was not long ago, under President Bill Clinton, that the US Senate had rejected Kyoto, voting 95-0. London's The Guardian backed Nader, pointing out that Clinton had wrecked the previous year's climate talks in The Hague. A searing essay in American Prospect titled Green Herring argued that the party consisted of dangerous spoilers who had no chance of getting elected, who mainly took votes from Democrats, and who, if they kept growing their vote, could deny the Democrats victory and propel the Republicans to control of both houses of Congress, giving them a supermajority with which they could not only gut environmental legislation, but probably most of the New Deal as well. Clinton fucked over the New Deal.
Well.
Heaven forbid that the Democrats might do something that would fuck over working Americans or make the world a worse place.
Mm.
After 2000, the Greens' vote in US presidential elections ticked down and has never recovered. I mean, I think that's the other thing about Nader is that I believe he's the most successful Greens-aligned candidate in US.
Because the voters who voted for the candidate that most represented their values and the policies they believed in were suitably admonished for voting in that way and warned to never try to do that shit again, I'm sure, in the liberal media.
Indeed. Thank God that's ended now.
Yeah.
Other moments from the Global Greens Conference. Conference host Bob Brown opened proceedings to a standing ovation, declaring that since the collapse of communism, materialism or economic rationalism, the rule of money over values, has had full reign. We Greens are the balancing factor, the natural reaction to this divisive ideology from the big end of town. He's talking about the big end of town.
What is he saying? I don't really understand what he's saying.
Well, he's sort of saying that since communism went away, it's all been neoliberalism all over the place. End of history. Liberal capitalism all over the place. The rule of money over values. And we're the ones that are standing against that. Labour Party's gone economic rationalist. They've gone neoliberal. He's not saying, hey, we're socialist or we're communist, of course, because he's Bob Brown, but he's sort of saying... So
he's saying the divisive ideology that he's referring to, is that an ideology that says you're either a communist or a capitalist?
No, I think he's saying materialism or economic rationalism, aka what we call neoliberalism. Ideology. That's the divisive ideology. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's just a little bit confusing to me. Maybe it's just the language of the
He's
time
not throwing communism in with materialism or economic rationalism. I don't think he's saying these are all the same and we need a third way or anything like that.
No. I guess when you say materialism to me, that's kind of open to interpretation, and a lot of people would say, well, we do need a materialist politics.
Oh, no. Yes, you would say materialist politics. Not materialism is like, consuming things and buying stuff.
Right, okay. Oh, like you're a material girl.
Yes. Yes.
Gotcha.
Not
I understand now. I just needed the pop reference. So if you're a material girl living in a material world, that's the divisive ideology that Bob Brown was talking about.
He hates Madonna. The one gay man who hates Madonna.
Oh, heresy.
I thought this is pretty amazing. Among the speakers, the most stirring response was for Colombian Green Senator Ingrid Betancourt. Apologies if I'm butchering your name, Ingrid, an anti-corruption campaigner who had taken on the drug cartels and, despite death threats against her and her children, was running for president the following year. Betancourt nearly broke down as she spoke about her struggle. Let us not list our weaknesses, but rather claim our strengths. We are not entitled to be a marginal political option. We should aim for power and obtain it. We are flying the modern flag of the new humanism. Our fight is for the salvation of the planet. To be green in this millennium, we have to take on the uniform of the new samurai to defend our values, our principles, our ideals above everything, even above our own life. Because with those values, without those principles, without those ideals, life becomes a condemnation. The first thing we should defeat is our own skepticism. She too got a standing ovation. Betancourt was not exaggerating. 10 months later, she was kidnapped while on the presidential campaign and held captive for 6 years.
Oh my God. I can see why. She sounds really great. Oh no. I want to go out. We've got to fight for Betancourt. Where is she now?
Oh, look, is she still with us? Oh, Ingrid, where are you?
Ingrid.
Is Ingrid the fucking like Colombian name?
Yeah, it doesn't sound very.
Imagine taking on the drug cartels in Colombia. She's still with us.
Yes.
She's against against political corruption. She was in office in 2000 till 2001. She's 62 now. She seems
She didn't change her
okay.
time in the 6 years of being a political prisoner. She didn't flip and go pro-corruption. That's good.
She ran for the presidential election in 2022, in which she finished 7th. Oh, that's a shame.
No.
Well, we'll look more into Ingrid, but based on that speech alone, pretty fucking cool.
Yeah. Wow.
The Global Greens Conference wrote a Global Greens Charter. They established the Global Greens at that particular conference, again, with the impetus of the Australian Greens, which I think is pretty cool. They decided to reconvene in Africa in 6 years' time. Paddy Manning says the whole thing could be dismissed as a talk fest, but it did give the Global Greens and the Australian Greens a common sense of identity and purpose. Bob Brown, waving the charter in his right hand at the podium, closed the conference with an optimistic statement of intent. We are going to change the world radically.
Radically.
Hell yeah. Last little bit of the chapter before we wrap it up here. The 2001 federal election is approaching and we're feeling good. Australian Greens feeling themselves. They're predicting they're going to win 2 to 5 seats in the Senate at that election.
Yep.
WA Greens did well. They picked up 2 more upper house seats on saving old growth forests and they outpolled the Democrats. We're starting to see that a bit more. Okay, the Democrats waning a little bit, but Greens are taking over.
Pulling ahead.
The Greens' big win in Western Australia was followed by a decent result in the Queensland state election, with the party averaging 7% of the vote in the 31 seats contested, a 50% increase, and outpolling the Democrats. More significantly, in the federal by-election held in Rhiannon soon after, the Greens polled 6%, helping Labor take the safe Liberal seat and rocking the unpopular Howard government, which even supporters were coming to regard as mean and tricky.
Do you know, I think that might be the only time that the seat of Rhiannon has ever been held by Labor.
Just for that one term.
Yeah.
From by-election. And then the Libs won it back. And then old Libby Watson-Brown comes along.
That's right.
And says, yes, please. The Greens are given Labor preferences in return for an agreement to halt land clearing. Ben Oaquist emailed all party MPs. In one deal for preferences in one seat, the Greens have achieved more than the Democrats have achieved in 5 years of deals with the Howard government. It is fantastic that the Greens and Labor can work together to achieve real wins for the environment.
Wow. And then the CPRS ruined it all.
The Queensland Greens felt they were odds on to win a Senate seat at that federal election. But of course, that wouldn't actually happen until 2010 with your favourite, Larissa. Things are looking ahead, but there is some tension. The spirit of optimism was reflected in the party's new glossy national magazine, Green, published 3 times a year and taking over from the Daily Planet newsletter out of Tasmania. There was a minor sticking point. The New South Wales branch wouldn't circulate the magazine among its members, being concerned about both the content and shouldering the cost of printing and distributing it. It was a small sign of the internal cracks already appearing, even as the party's strength was building, particularly between the Australian Greens and those in New South Wales. This is very lame to me.
Why is it lame to you? Which part? What do you mean?
There's serious tension over this fucking Greens magazine that no one reads.
But it is a little bit like classic New South Wales Greens, right? Where they're like, well, we don't need a fucking magazine. Why should we pay for a fucking magazine?
I mean, I guess you would hope that if you have a magazine of some kind, a document that's shared, and we still have the Green magazine, of course, is that that's a place for all the various views within the party to be expressed. And so, yeah. I
know. It's kind of like, get over yourselves and just support it. But at the same time, I respect the fuck you-ness of it all.
I wonder how much money it costs anyway. There was tension, for example, when Rhiannon introduced a draft education policy that proposed to strip public funding from elite private schools that charged more than $8,000 a year. The Queenslanders thought the Greens should support diversity in schools. Christine Milne did not want the party to attack private education. Margaret Blakers, who was part of the sort of administration arm of the party, thought there should be more emphasis on increasing the cake rather than redistributing funds from a few wealthy schools.
I wonder what they mean by the Queenslanders. Like who at this point? We didn't have any MPs.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I guess the members.
But yes, members, they must still be involved in national conference. They'd still play a role in determining federal policy.
In terms of national council.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, right? Because that obviously would not be the position of Queensland Greens today, I would say.
No. And of course, and I'm sure we'll get to this in reading the book, the school education policy is like a very big flashpoint and a point of tension between Rhiannon and the rest of the federal Greens party.
Yes.
Also, of course, growing tensions between New South Wales branch and Tasmania, Bob Brown versus Rhiannon. The tension continues.
Kung kung, much like Logan Paul and Mike Tyson, Rhiannon and Bob Brown came before them. Bob Brown is Mike Tyson?
Sure. Oh, God. All right.
No, I don't mean that's a joke as satire.
I see.
Bob Brown is not Mike Tyson, to be clear.
Next time in part 2 of this chapter, we'll look at the 2001 election, Bob Brown's awful Telstra for trees idea. Telstra for trees.
Telstra for trees. It's so catchy.
9/11 happens. Spoiler alert. The war on terror and the groundswell of support for the Greens that emerged in the early 2000s. Next time on Inside the Green.
Next time. Woo-woo. Thank you for being a patron, dear listener. We love you so much and for supporting the show. If you want to do more to support the show, just tell a friend, chat to someone at a branch meeting, at a door knock, at the family dinner table this Christmas. What have you been up to? Oh, listening to this podcast. It's called Serious Danger. It's really good. It's actually only $3 a month to subscribe and get access to fortnightly content. Just a little script you could try out. But until then, goodbye. Good night.
Bye.
We love you.
We love you. Bye.
Serious Danger Australia.